A mysterious lab experiment begins with a green fluid injected into an egg yolk, causing an identical yolk to form within seconds. Meanwhile, on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, the legendary actress Elizabeth finally receives her long-awaited star. Her fans gather excitedly during the first year, showering it with love and admiration. But time passes, and soon, the star is forgotten, left cracked and neglected. Elizabeth herself begins to fade from the limelight. Now middle-aged, the once sought-after actress struggles to find roles and is eventually relegated to hosting a low-budget aerobics show. One day, finding the women's restroom out of order, Elizabeth hesitantly enters the men's room. Hiding inside a stall, she overhears Harvey, the network president, enter. Without pausing his phone call, he complains about her age and laments that the show needs someone fresh and young. After he leaves, Elizabeth stands before the mirror, staring at her reflection, absorbing his cruel words. At lunch, Harvey fires her, hiding behind vague language as he lacks the courage to say it outright. Dejected and distracted, Elizabeth later spots her billboard being taken down. A car crashes into hers in a horrific accident, but in a surreal twist, she emerges without a single scratch. The doctor, noting her birth date, wishes her a happy birthday. This final reminder of her aging sends her into a breakdown. Alone, she is interrupted by a nurse who insists on one more exam. Feeling her spine and muttering, "Perfect candidate," the nurse slips her jacket on, placing a small package in the pocket. Outside, Elizabeth unwraps it to find a flash drive marked with the substance, a phone number, and the words, "It changed my life." At the grocery store, she runs into Fred, an old classmate who compliments her looks and slips her his number. Back home, she watches the flash drive's video, which advertises the substance, a product that lets users relive their youth, allowing them to switch between younger and older bodies every 7 days. Convinced it's a scam, Elizabeth tosses the drive. Yet, after a lonely night at a bar and the uncomfortable effects of drinking, she reconsiders, calling the mysterious number. The voice on the other end gives her an address and instructs her to bring her ID. The next morning, she finds an ad for a casting call seeking the next Elizabeth. Enraged, she heads to the address from the call, a hidden building down a dark alley, where she retrieves a black envelope from a locked box labeled 503. Once home, she opens the package to reveal a kit with instructions. Activate once, stabilize daily, change bodies weekly, and remember you are one. Filled with a mix of dread and curiosity, Elizabeth takes a deep look at her aging face in the mirror. Steeling herself, she injects the green liquid. Moments pass in eerie silence before her body spasms in agony. Her pupils split, and her spine twists as a slit opens on her back. Amidst her screams, a fully formed younger version of herself, a vision from her prime, emerges from her old body. As she stands, she sees her real eyes, a familiar green, hidden behind this new body's dazzling blue. She retches green fluid as the wound in the old body seals. The new Elizabeth, now going by Sue, injects the original with special food packs from the kit, keeping it alive but dormant. The next day, when a nosebleed reminds her to stabilize, she extracts spine fluid from the original body, stopping her symptoms immediately. Donning Trini clothes, she heads to the audition, where she introduces herself as Sue. Harvey is captivated by her youthful allure and hires her on the spot. Sue agrees on one condition. She works every other week, claiming she must care for her sick mother. Desperate to add her beauty to his network, Harvey agrees. Sue revels in her newfound stardom, soaking up the attention as her face graces new billboards. Every day, she administers the stabilizer, leaving the older body in the bathroom untouched. At the end of the week, she uses the kit to connect both bodies, initiating a blood exchange that forces her back into her original form. Awakening as Elizabeth, she feels the spine scar's sharp ache and the dullness of her real life. Harvey hands her a box of her belongings, barely saying goodbye. Her week is a painful contrast to Sue's glamorous existence, and she impatiently awaits the next transformation. Each cycle brings a new black envelope with a refill kit, and Elizabeth dutifully heads to the shady alley to retrieve it. In Sue's form, she begins hollowing out a wall in the bathroom, hoping to construct a secret hideout. Hammering late into the night, she's interrupted by a neighbor, but he's so captivated by her beauty that he ignores his complaint. Sue sweetly tells him Elizabeth moved out, closing the door before he can respond. As Sue, she becomes bolder, more ruthless, embracing this endless cycle of youth and fame. Yet, something within her begins to crack, a creeping horror settling in her mind as she becomes prisoner to this existence. She's finally free to start her new life. Sue dazzles as the host of her TV show, basking in the adoration of her fans who can't get enough of her beauty, which she flaunts unabashedly. Nights are wild and carefree, and tonight, she brings home a new guy, ready for an adventurous evening. But just as things heat up, an unsettling screech cuts through the air, and a trickle of blood escapes her nose. Her time is up. Panicking, Sue rushes to the bathroom and unlocks the secret room, finding Elizabeth's body writhing as it devours the last food packet. Desperate to get back to her guest, Sue decides to bend the rules. Instead of doing the usual body swap, she repurposes one of the stabilizer tubes, draining more liquid from Elizabeth's body and injecting it into herself to stave off the transition. Feeling rejuvenated, she returns to her guest and they enjoy a steamy night. But then, as her clothes are unzipped, a horrifying scene unfolds. Organs and blood spill from her body. She bolts upright in bed in the form of Elizabeth. The next morning, surrounded by remnants of Sue's chaotic night, a trashed apartment and a note from the guy saying he'll be back for his bike. But as she looks at her hands, horror strikes. Her hand is wrinkled and aged, the telltale sign of the extra hours Sue spent in her body. Desperate, Elizabeth scrubs her hands, but the old skin won't fade. Frantically, she calls the mysterious number from the flash drive, only to hear an indifferent voice inform her there's no remedy. When she tries blaming Sue, the voice coldly reminds her that Sue isn't a separate person. Disturbed, Elizabeth mechanically cleans up the mess Sue left behind, watching Sue's show on TV with growing resentment. The vision of Sue's young, flawless face fills her with disgust, and she slams the TV off. The doorbell rings. It's her neighbor, asking her out once more. Elizabeth stays silent, ignoring him. Later, she ventures into the alley to retrieve her refill box, but a chilling whisper of Sue seems to echo around her, sending her running in fear. She takes refuge in a nearby diner, hiding her aged hand with a glove. There, an elderly man speaks cryptically, mentioning how long 7 days can feel. Elizabeth is startled to notice he bears the same birthmark as the nurse who first gave her the flash drive. He drops his wallet, revealing a card marked 207, confirming her suspicions. This man is living in a new, youthful body, thanks to the same substance. He begins to share his harrowing experience. He's grown lonely, trapped by a life with no real sense of self, and every change brings him closer to forgetting that his old body ever mattered. When he asks if the young body has started to devour her, she bolts in terror. Back at her apartment, she stumbles into the guy from last night, who angrily demands his bike. His rage is a painful reminder of how others see her through Sue's body. Seeking solace, she decides to call her old friend Fred, eventually agreeing to a date. She meticulously selects her outfit, but when she starts applying makeup, she instinctively copies Sue's style. As she heads out, a billboard with Sue's glamorous image catches her eye, feeding her insecurities. Frustrated, she returns to the bathroom and alters her makeup, adjusting it to better reflect her true age. But the vision of the billboard haunts her, sparking a breakdown as she tears at her hair and makeup. In the end, she cancels the date, ignoring Fred's worried messages. A week later, Sue is taping her show when she feels a bizarre bulge on her body. Horrified, she pauses the recording, throwing on a robe to rush to her dressing room. She catches another glimpse of the bulge and, with mounting terror, manipulates it through her body until it reaches her stomach. Digging into her belly button, she pulls out a chicken leg, evidence of Elizabeth's binge-eating episodes. When Sue finally wakes up after the next swap, her frustration boils over. She finds the remnants of Elizabeth's meals and calls the voice to complain, fuming over Elizabeth's lazy indulgence while she struggles to keep up her demanding lifestyle. The voice's only response is a blunt reminder that there's no she and you. At work, Sue gets unexpected news. She's been so successful that the network wants her to host a New Year's Eve special. Relishing her newfound fame, she heads home, taking more fluid from Elizabeth's body to stay in control. This routine continues for several days, with Sue draining Elizabeth's essence to the point that a festering, green sore appears on Elizabeth's back. When Elizabeth finally returns, her horror knows no bounds. Her body is decrepit, aged beyond recognition, her legs barely functional. Furious, she calls the mysterious number, demanding that Sue be cancelled. But as she considers her flourishing career, she turns down the offer, bitterly reminding herself that Sue is just another part of her. On the final night, Elizabeth struggles to stand, her legs weak and unresponsive. She props herself up with difficulty, cooking large quantities of food while watching Sue on TV. In the interview, Sue casually mocks the old version of her show and the woman Elizabeth used to be. Enraged, Elizabeth hurls food at the screen, the mockery too much to bear. She grabs a newspaper, covering the billboard image outside her window, but the sight of Sue's flawless face keeps creeping back into her mind. As the time for the change nears, she stares herself down, vowing to maintain control of Sue once she takes over again. With her last ounce of strength, Elizabeth screams at the mirror, urging herself to restrain the urge that has trapped them both. Sue jolts awake to a foul stench and a sea of trash. Glaring at the mess, she seethes and storms into the hidden room where Elizabeth lies unconscious. Driven by rage and a thirst for control, Sue took out multiple syringes of spine fluid, determined to remain herself, no matter the cost. Over 3 months, Sue's showbiz career flourishes, with her image plastered across billboards and screens promoting her New Year's Eve spectacle. One night, she brings a man home, asking him to wait as she vanishes into the hidden room. The space has deteriorated into a morbid pit filled with refuse and infected syringes. Desperate to maintain control, Sue takes out more fluid, only to notice it's thick, dark, and necrotic. A wave of dizziness hits, and she calls the stabilizer service in panic. A voice calmly tells her she's drained every last drop. The fluid needs time to regenerate, and she must switch bodies. But with her big show looming, Sue refuses and collapses in agony as her nose begins to bleed. Overwhelmed and weakened, Sue drags herself to the bathroom, surrendering to the transformation. The man, hearing noises, comes to check on her, but Elizabeth locks the door before he can enter. Ignoring his confused calls, she stares into the mirror, horrified to see a grotesque blend of herself and Sue. Overcome by rage, she shouts at the man to leave. As he retreats, Elizabeth struggles to walk, stumbling through the apartment in this malformed body. In a fit of frustration, she pulls out an old poster of herself, a bitter reminder of what she once was. The following morning, a black envelope arrives. Inside, a note informs her that the final delivery awaits in a nearby alley. Cloaked in layers to hide her monstrous form, Elizabeth dashes outside, frightening a neighbor who shrinks back in terror. Grabbing the box, she races home to find a single syringe of black fluid. She hesitates, hearing an eerie voice warn her there's no return from this path. Ignoring it, she injects the dark fluid into Sue's body, preparing to end it all, when she remembers the impending show. Pausing mid-injection, she administers CPR, trying to revive Sue, who stirs, nose bleeding, a sign that jolts Elizabeth into action. Elizabeth digs out the change kit, mixing her blood into the fluid to stabilize Sue. When Sue awakens, neither of them falls unconscious as expected. Instead, they stare at each other, bewildered, until Sue spots the termination syringe lying on the floor. She lunges at Elizabeth, a frenzy of fear in her eyes, slamming her against the poster and shoving her into shards of broken glass. Elizabeth, bleeding and desperate, smashes a vase over Sue's head before staggering toward the bathroom. Sue recovers quickly, battering the door until it yields, her fury unabated. Dragging Elizabeth into the mirror, Sue forces her to look at their distorted forms, smashing Elizabeth's head against the glass repeatedly until she collapses. Elizabeth tries to crawl away, but Sue viciously kicks her down again, the brutal assault stretching on until Elizabeth finally falls limp, lifeless. Panting and drenched in blood, Sue breaks down in sobs, her anguish turning to resolve as she remembers the show. That evening, Sue arrives at the TV studio, holding herself together as she takes a seat at the makeup station. But mid-application, in a panic, she flees to the bathroom, spitting blood into the sink. A cough sends a tooth tumbling from her mouth. Horrified, Sue pulls out 2 more, each slipping loose with barely a touch, filling her mouth with blood. The mirror reveals her nails beginning to peel from her fingers. Her stomach drops as one of her ears detaches, falling into her lap. Fighting the urge to scream, she covers the wound with her hand as a man enters the elevator. Back in her apartment, Sue frantically rummages for the last vial of green activator serum. She injects herself, writhing in agony as her body contorts. Her spine cracks and flesh bubbles, splitting apart to form something wholly unnatural. When the transformation ends, Sue stares in horror at the reflection, a grotesque creature with Elizabeth's face merging hideously on her back. Vomiting green fluid, the new monster Elisa Sue dresses herself for the show, applying makeup and crafting a mask from her old poster to conceal her nightmarish face. At the TV studio, she sneaks onto the stage unnoticed, surrounded by illusions of adoring fans. The lights flicker on, revealing her to the real crowd. When she tries to speak, her voice is a garbled, mangled sound. Her mask slips, and bile floods her throat as she pukes up fragments of body parts to the audience's horrified screams. Cries of monster and freak echo through the room as a mob surrounds her, pushing her with disgust and fear. Elisa Sue collapses, tearfully reaching out for understanding but finding only hostility. One man grabs a bat, smashing it against her, severing her head from her shoulders. But her head regenerates slowly, to the crowd's terror, as her arm detaches and sprays them with blood. The red rain slicks the floor, causing people to slip and tumble over one another. Taking advantage of the chaos, Elisa Sue stumbles out of the studio and into the night, only to collapse on the street, her body exploding into a ghastly shower of flesh and viscera. Amid the carnage, Elizabeth's face crawls from the pile, desperately dragging itself toward her old star on the Walk of Fame. Reaching the star, she remembers her past glory, the cheers, and the fame. As dawn breaks, she slowly melts away, a floor scrubber passing over her remains as if they were just another stain. And that's the twisted journey of the substance. A story of fame, obsession, and the terrifying lengths one will go to stay in control, even if it means losing everything that makes them human. Would you dare try the substance if it meant chasing your dreams? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more dark and thrilling recaps.